Clem Newton-Brown, Tom Hitchcock, how are you?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good to hear. I'm enjoying that background. What's is that a space station or something? Is this kind of
Yeah, look, that's a concept for a vertiport for our electric air taxi infrastructure operations, done by a very talented architect that we work with, called Rafael Contreras.
there we are. It's fascinating. It's a wonderful piece of work that. So I'm sure we're going to hear all about this now. As per usual, I don't know you. We were connected on LinkedIn. That's how we communicated. Okay. I had a little nosy before this session though, and I noticed an OAM there. What was that for?
Look, in a past life, I was involved in politics, and yes, I was a former deputy mayor in Melbourne and member of the last Liberal government in Victoria, 2010 to 2014. So yeah, services to the community.
Love it, love it. That's you must be proud of that accolade.
Oh yeah, look, it was nice to be recognised for sure, but it was a long time ago now, and yeah, look, I've had a lot of fun in politics over the years, but now I'm very focused on my new venture.
Okay, brilliant. Well, there's your platform. I can't think of a better segue. So yeah, tell us all about it, mate.
Yeah, look, well, I suppose you brought up my ancient history, and look, in addition to politics, I was also working in planning law, and one of my clients was a helicopter company that operates from the helipad on the Yarra River. And so this is how I first got involved with this industry, was when Uber had planned. They released a white paper in 2016, and they had this concept for aviation on demand, like an Uber Air. And they were looking for a test city after Dallas and LA, which were their first two test cities to focus on. And they were looking at Melbourne, and my client had the prime site there on the Yarra River, and so I set up Skyports to get a seat at the table for the discussions they were having with government. And look, it worked. We got that seat at the table. We went over to Washington for the announcement. All very exciting when Uber announced that Melbourne was going to be the third test city for electric air taxis. But that didn't last long. Uber sort of collapsed to their ambitions. I think coming into a city and taking it over with rideshare in advance of any regulations was something they could do quite easily. Doing it in the air was another thing altogether. So I think they realised that they probably had a role to play when the aircraft are operational as a booking platform. But in terms of actually starting the industry, I think they realised that perhaps they'd bitten off more they can chew, and there was a lot of companies that were investing a lot of money in building aircraft and trying to sort of get this industry off the ground. So Uber's now out of the picture, but look, there's literally tens of billions of dollars have been put into companies that are building essentially electric helicopters, and the idea is that they'll be quieter, cleaner, and able to operate in a way which democratizes air travel. And helicopters are seen as noisy playthings for rich people to get around in. And the idea behind this industry, which is globally called advanced air mobility, is that providing another way of moving goods and people through electric aviation. So there's still a way to go. There's some of the big companies such as Boeing, Bell, Airbus, Embraer. They've all been working on prototypes. So it's not like it's just a few people in a garden shed coming up with some contraptions, although there's plenty of those as well. There's probably 1,000 aircraft in development, and look, there's probably about half a dozen that are close to getting certified for commercial operations. They're already flying. You can go onto YouTube and you can look at companies such as Joby and Archer and Whisk. They're already flying prototypes, but it's a big step to get from a prototype flying to a commercially safe aircraft, and that's what they're working through at the moment.
That's interesting. So I like your point where it's rich boys' toys, if you like, because I remember joking as an ambitious young man saying, if I was ever wealthy enough, I'd like a helicopter. The only issue is the only place I could land it is on the top of the hospital or police station. I don't plan to go to either. But that's but by the looks of it, you've sort of sold some of that in the
Yeah.
background. Well, now obviously I understand obviously the gap between prototype and reality. Okay, but with aviation, that would be an even bigger gap than usual. I remember reading a book of Matthew Said on black box thinking, and it told us that was when early air travel, it was 50% mortality rate. Now it's one of the safest ways to travel, entirely because of the steps and the safety measures and how they learn the feedback loops and what have you. Is that still the same to get it from prototype to reality? Is there much more
Yeah. Yeah, look,
safety?
for the mathematicians out there, 10 to the minus 9 is the safety factor that they're going to, and that's the same as getting on a Boeing passenger airline, same degree of safety. And as you pointed out, it is the safest way of travel is by plane, statistically. When there is a plane crash, everybody freaks out and everything else, but the reality is every time you get in your motor vehicle, you could be one of the hundreds of people who get killed on the roads every year. So so it is a safe form of travel. That said, helicopters are not particularly safe. There are multiple single points of failure in a helicopter that we'll see crashes occur. And so what they're working towards is a higher degree of safety. And look, part of that safety is the autonomy that is proposed for these aircraft. Now, most aircraft currently have autopilots, and there's a lot of safety built in already with autopilots. With this industry, they're looking at taking the pilot out altogether eventually. Boeing have their aircraft is called WISC, and they're going straight to autonomy, so they're never going to have a pilot in their aircraft. So you basically get in there, and it flies like a drone. Someone's piloting it on the ground to some extent. But yeah, look, the thought is that while it's will freak a lot of people out initially, it will actually be safer to be in an aircraft that is it won't take off if it's too windy. It won't make dumb decisions. It won't have had a big night out the night before and be a bit foggy on landing. All these sort of things, the human factors, which contribute to most of the air crashes that we see. So yeah, safety is a big thing. And look, there's a lot of focus on this industry, and you have one accident and it could destroy the industry. We've seen some setbacks with self-driving cars, and there's places in the States where that's already happening. I was in San Francisco and couldn't believe my eyes to see a passenger taxi just stop at the traffic signal and then drive off, and there was no one in it. And and that's they've had some issues. They have had some accidents, and that's inevitable. Although in the air, you obviously it's very different to having a bit of a bingle, with a stop sign in a car to dropping out of the sky. So obviously it's a much higher degree of safety that's required, and that's why it's taking so long. They're all the regulators are, this is a new type of aircraft that doesn't exist yet, so they've actually got to, have the new rules and then apply them. But you can be certain that the world is preparing for this. Our own regulator, CASA, the air safety regulator, they have. They've released documents about advanced air mobility. They've released a roadmap. They've released vertiport guidelines, as has the counterparts in the US, the FAA, and in Europe, the EASA as their air safety regulator. They're all working on basically this revolution that's coming. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting space, but I think the safety issues will mean that it is going to go slower than a lot of people would like.
Okay, and if we make the comparison to electric cars, or I'll leave the driverless part to one side for a moment. But they've been about for a little while now. I know in the UK they're quite prevalent. They're all over the place. There's lots more charging stations than there are in Australia, but Australia has different logistical issues. But the logistical issues are mostly around distance. Okay, and that's where the comparison is how far you can go on one charge to a tank of petrol. Is there a similar situation on distance with the helicopters?
Oh yeah, look, you've hit the nail on the head there, Tom, with the one of the big issues, and that is range and how useful the aircraft will be. Now with the traditional aircraft, you have to carry enough fuel in reserve to enable you to divert and go to another airport, and there'll be a percentage of your fuel tank you need to keep available, and that'll be a similar situation with your battery power. The problem with batteries is that their energy to weight is not as good as conventional fossil fuel, and also you're not reducing the weight as you're burning the fuel, which was what happens in an aircraft. So you're potentially flying around a really big heavy battery that's almost empty, and it's you're not getting the benefit of having a lighter aircraft either. So there are all these factors are really relevant, and that comes down to how useful the aircraft are. If because of these limitations you can only fly for 20 minutes, is that actually useful enough to be anything other than a tourist joyride? And certainly there'll be a market for tourism uses, and I think that'll be the first use cases for these aircraft. But for longer range, I think we're going to see hybrid and hydrogen coming into play. There's an Australian, the only Australian developer of an electric air taxi called AMSL Aero, based in Bankstown, and they've got an interesting box wing design aircraft, and they're going to be powered by hydrogen. So hydrogen is not yet a fuel that's been proven for aviation. There's a lot of interest around it, and Australia, I suppose, is one of the leaders in hydrogen. But there are issues about storage and keeping it cool enough and everything else. So yeah, it is. There is a long way to go, but the range is something that's going to be when it comes down to the business model. That's going to be important. And look, one of the aircraft that we've got rights to bring into Australia, which is really interesting, is it's called Electra Aero, and it's a STOL aircraft, so short takeoff and landing. So it's a bit like a cross between a helicopter and a light plane, and it'll take off in about 30 meters. So it has a short rolling start, and then it jumps up into the air. The benefit of that is that it's you use a lot of energy lifting something straight up, whereas if you can use a wing and go on an angle, you use less fuel. And they've also got an onboard charging system, so it's they can use conventional fuel to charge their batteries while they're in the air. So they've got 1,000-kilometer range, and that's something that's really could open up regional Australia. And certainly the policy support in Australia through our government and air regulators is the longer range regional connectivity is where people I think can see the most value. And if you've got these little 9-seater STOL aircraft that can come into little towns where they don't have any air service, that could be game changing for some of these communities. So yeah, I think when people think about air taxis, they think about jets and sort of jumping around on city rooftops and things. And look, that may happen. Whether it's actually that useful is another thing. I don't think Australian cities are congested enough to justify that. Just to give you an example, if you come out of your hotel or a meeting in Melbourne or Sydney and you want to go to the airport, by the time you found a vertiport, got in the aircraft, got there, got out of the vertiport there, got your way into the airport, you're probably going to be there just as quickly jumping on the train in Sydney or getting an Uber in Melbourne to get to the airport.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So there's still lots to happen. Actually, the building behind you reminds me of the Jet Sets home, just a little bit
Yeah.
closer to the ground.
Yes.
Strangely enough. But I think maybe that hybrid model might be the way to get around the current safety regulations around flying. Then, so if you've got that safety backup there anyway, and it's electric get started, that'd probably be your stepping stone to get going. And you already answered my question on the hydrogen as well, because obviously that's next on the ground vehicles, that's for sure. But you said Uber stepped out; they went a little bit too far ahead of themselves. What about like something like Amazon? Because they like to innovate as well, and they talk a lot about the drone deliveries and that, which are in trials and what have you right now. What about a company like that?
Yeah, look, drone deliveries are a sort of related industry. And look, drone deliveries have been going on for years now. You know, Australia was actually one of the first countries to do drone deliveries with a company called Wing, which is one of the Google offshoots, Google Alphabet company's offshoots. And they came to Australia because our air regulator gave them more love than they can get in the States to actually start a service. So I'm talking 5 years ago, they started doing deliveries of coffees and donuts in Canberra, and basically what they do is they you order a coffee or they've got all sorts of other items as well now, and the aircraft comes to your house and hovers above it and drops a package down on a string with a brown paper bag attached, and then flies off. So that's been happening for a while. Amazon Prime was their drone delivery service. The big issue with drone deliveries is how you get the actual product into people's hands, and and in a sort of outer suburban area where you've got driveways and gardens and things, then it's a bit easier to do. But in the inner city, it's obviously it's a lot harder. I think the drone deliveries and the passenger carrying aircraft, the two industries are sort of running parallel, and I think eventually you'll find that the drones will get so big that they're carrying hundreds of kilograms of goods, and then I would anticipate they're traveling between nodes, so industrial nodes, warehouse to warehouse, business to business, and then that becomes a very, very useful thing, that if you've got some goods that need to go from Dandenong to Frankston and you can get them there cheaply and quickly, then I can see that being far more useful than delivering a coffee or a donut. And eventually, I think those freight drones will become so big that they're essentially carrying hundreds of kilos, and that's at the point where they've proven their safety, and I think that's where you'll see the boxes come out and the people go in, and because it's proven safe enough for without a pilot.
Yeah, so it's all in that spirit of innovation, and I do think there are parallels there. And I find it's interesting. So you started this conversation where you come from politics, and in the planning space, you had a contact in the Yarra, if I heard correctly, with a helipad and what have you. Now, that's quite a big leap into what you're doing now from where you come from, and it all come from that one particular contact.
Yeah, look, well, yes and no. Look, my experiences are in politics, town planning, law, and tourism. I also do tourism on islands in Tasmania, and it's a pretty eclectic background. Sort of master of nothing, but a wide range of skills, and this industry, what I sort of say to people is, in terms of actually getting a new industry off the ground, I'm probably not the best person to be building the network or operating a network, but what I'm doing is assembling the pieces of the puzzle to make them make sense, so that a big investor can come in and actually get the service up and running. So in that sense, the skill set I've got, they all complement each other to have in terms of, there's a lot of political policy work in terms of convincing politicians and that this is the policy that they should be supporting, and that's a lot of the work I do, is serving on committees to that extent. Getting the community on board, being in politics, you nothing happens unless you've got the community on board, and that's a big part of this. Is we need to make sure the community actually wants this, or it won't happen. Planning, the approvals for things, for new, for vertiports, which are going to be different to heliports. Again, that comes back to my legal experience in planning. So yeah, it's a bit of an eclectic background, but I think if not me, who? I've got enough of experience in all these sort of what seems to be very niche, unrelated areas, but in the context of creating a whole new industry out of something that needs new infrastructure and political support and community support. I'm really enjoying the work, and I think it builds on the experience that I've got.
And I think that's a good lesson for our listeners as well. If there's a bit of a career change for them, and it doesn't look at first hand that that's necessarily a right fit for them, there's a case study where there's transferable skills and applicable skills, where things can work, and you're living proof of that, which is nice. Now, most of what you're talking about, it feels quite futurist. It's in the space of innovation. When you talk about user cases, I would say that user case for the rural towns that don't have airport accessibility, this is absolutely yes over the 20-minute joyride, if you like, by tourism. Not to say that isn't a valid use for it, but it's lesser than the more community-based view. But we're in the space of innovation, we're in the space of being a bit of a futurist. Let's fast forward 50 years in the same space that you're in now. Okay. What would you say the landscape of this would look like?
Well, it's very much dependent on what the community wants. And if the community doesn't want this, the politicians aren't going to push it, because as an ex-politician, you don't push stuff that's not popular, or else you get voted out. So, so that's the first thing is the community will decide. And that's unknown. And that's one of the risks that I've got in doing this, is that I don't know whether, at the moment, if you were to say, I want to run a helicopter from a Bunnings car park, people will probably go, well, that's too obtrusive. We don't want that, I think. But if you were to say, well, it's going to be a electric aircraft, it's going to be quiet, it's going to be affordable. You can get from your Bunnings car park to the airport or to the city quickly and affordably. Maybe they then say, well, actually, we are prepared to do this. They might not be prepared to do it, in your in a residential area, because it still is obtrusive. But in an area like a Bunnings car park, or an office building, or a shopping centre, these are places which are, there is a lot of activity and commerce and noise already, and I could see, shopping centres and industrial sites, and big box retail and service stations, things like that, being spots where you have your vertiports. So it's not about sort of landing, at your house. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think it'll be a matter of having a fine grain of vertiports that you could be anywhere in a city, and be within a few minutes drive of a vertiport. And then you can make the call of, well, I could grab an Uber Air to get across to Frankston, or I can get in an Uber car, and it might take me an hour and a half to drive around the bay, and the air transport might cost me a little more, but it's going to be an hour faster, so I'm prepared to pay a bit more to do that. So I think that's the balance, is the first of all, getting the lowest impact possible, but also showing that impact is of value to everybody, not just a few people can use it. And that comes down to it being cheap enough that most people can use it. They might not use it every day, but that they can use it. And then it just comes down to the business case of how affordable can you make it. And if it's not affordable, then you don't get the community support, because people just again come back to it being, this is just for rich people.
Yeah. No, I love that. That makes perfect sense to me. Okay, listen, let's bring us to an end now, draw us to a close. Anybody listening to this and they want to ask you questions, they would like to reach out, or want to know more about this project and how it's tracking, how should they monitor this and contact you?
I'm very easily found. Just Google my name or Skyports, and the website and contacts will come up there. And yeah, look, we're probably going to do a new investment round this year. We use the virtual crowdfunding platform, so people can make small investments and own a share in this moonshot of a business. So yeah, if you think that I'm on the right track, where our focus this year is on an actual verted pad product, which is going to be a landing surface that ameliorates downwash and outwash and deals with potential fire and other items. So we're sort of looking at providing a product that property owners can buy to join a network. So we think it's going to have global applicability, and we're developing a prototype with the support of Oz Industry at the moment.
Yep, love it. I really appreciate that. So again, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I enjoyed that.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. As before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.